Hello, bruvs. We're back with new book arrivals number 307. I believe it's 307. It could be 308. But yeah, let's do it. These are books I purchased in the last 2 days. Well, not including today. So the previous 2 days, obviously, this is a vintage copy of Stephen King's Firestarter. Drew Barrymore on the cover, so I assume it's the movie edition. 1981, it's in great shape. Probably worth something. I don't know how much, but more than $1. Doll here. Doll here. A handbook on hanging, being a short introduction to the fine art of execution by Charles Duff. All very proper to be read and kept in every family. Obviously, trying to be funny. Originally written in 1928, this is a 2011 edition. I was hoping for more illustrations, but nothing. The binding is a little restricting, so even if, I guess I could probably read it without breaking the spine. A handbook on hanging is a satiric tribute to that unappreciated mainstay of civilization, the hangman. With barbed wit, Charles Duff not only writes of hanging, but also of electrocution, decapitation, and gassing, of innocent men executed and of executions botched, of bloodlust mobs and the political expedients of the great. A classic satire admired by Bertolt Brecht and Dylan Thomas, Duff's polemic makes it clear that whatever else capital punishment may be said to be, justice, vengeance, a deterrent, it is certainly killing. The destruction of black civilization, great issues of a race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD by Chancellor Williams. This book, obviously small press, has some value, not a lot, probably $10 to $15 range, but in the condition that it's in, on the lower end. What year was this published? 87. To the black youth of the 1960s for beginning the second great emancipation, the liberation of our minds, and thus changing the course of history. Better free your mind instead, brava. What became of the black people of Sumer? The traveler asked the old man. For ancient records show that the people of Sumer were black. What happened to them? Ah, the old man sighed. They lost their history, so they died. They were captured by Arabs and sent into slavery, is what happened. Actually, I think they were captured by blacks and then sold to Arabs into slavery. This work is a summary of the 16 years of research and field studies which were intended for a 2-volume history of the African people. The writing plan for the 2 volumes would have been required at least another 5 years, even if the serious impairment of my vision had not occurred. In the meantime, there had developed an urgent need for the results of my research, which concentrated on crucial areas in the history of the blacks that had been either unknown, known and misinterpreted, or known but deliberately ignored. My own history classes were only a part of the rebellion against the only kind of textbooks available. It was a general rebellion against the subtle message from even the most liberal white authors and their Negro disciples. You belong to a race of nobodies. You have no worthwhile history to point to with pride. A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. The restored edition. I don't know how many different copies of this I have. Too many. But for 25 cents, Was not leaving it behind. Published posthumously in 1964, A Movable Feast, Ernest Hemingway's classic memoir of Paris in the 1920s, remains one of his most beloved works. Since Hemingway's personal papers were released in 1979, scholars have examined and debated the changes made to the text before publication. Now, this new special restored edition presents the original manuscript as the author intended it to be published. Another quarter book I bought, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. A Little Life follows four college classmates broke, adrift, and buoyed only by their friendship and ambition as they move to New York in search of fame and fortune. While their relationships, which are tinged by addiction, success, and pride, deepen over the decades, the men are held together by their devotion to the brilliant and enigmatic Jude, a man scarred by an unspeakable childhood trauma. A hymn to brotherly bonds and a masterful depiction of love in the 21st century. Hanya Yanagihara's stunning novel is about the families we are born into and those that we make for ourselves. Kazufumi Shiraisha, Me Against the World, translated by Raj Matani. Raj Matani, buddy. Pretty short one. A jaded journalist inherits an abandoned manuscript penned by an old acquaintance who has recently passed away. The writing, a collection of ruminations on the nature of existence by a 53-year-old businessman who, as far as the journalist remembers, was a kind and gentle soul, is nothing short of shocking. In it, this apparent everyman, whom we know only as Mr. K, writes that he has a son, daughter, and wife, but has no love for them. He claims that humans are like cancer cells destroying Mother Earth with their unrestrained propagation. He looks at our mortal destiny with an unflinching honesty and turns to psychic mediums for clues to the afterlife, wondering what immortality, if it were possible, would mean for our spiritual well-being. Me Against the Wind takes the reader down the rabbit hole of the raging mind of this man who only rejects the world in order to save it. I think there's more, but there's a sticker in the way, so I guess we're not going to see it. Nope, it's going to rip off and leave pieces. Deadly Education, Naomi Novik, and I only recognize this name from her other books, which I've sold several of, but as you can see, there's a mongoose took a bite out of this one. It seems almost like a kid's book, but I could be wrong. Everyone loves Orion like everyone else, that is. As far as I'm concerned, he can keep his flashy combat magic to himself. Yeah, if that's not Harry Potter-esque, I don't know what is. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, winner of the Nobel Prize, Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Another 25-cent book, as half of these are. Chronicle of a Death Foretold. A man returns to the town where a baffling murder took place 27 years earlier. Determined to get to the bottom of the story, just hours after marrying the beautiful Angela Vicario, everyone agrees, Bayardo San Roman returned his bride in disgrace to her parents. Her distraught family forced her to name her first lover, and her twin brothers announced their intention to murder Santiago Nassar for dishonoring their sister. Yet, if everyone knew the murder was going to happen, why did no one intervene to stop it? The more that is learned, the less is understood. And as the story races to its inexplicable conclusion, an entire society, not just a pair of murderers, is put on trial. Slaughterhouse-Five, I've never read it. I have about 8 copies of it. I'm not going to discuss it because I've bought so many copies that it's ridiculous. The Boys in the Boat, Daniel James Brown. The indifferent. Oh, that's from the author of The Boys in the Boat. The indifferent stars above. The harrowing saga of the Donner Party. I have a couple books on the Donners. This one actually is sellable. And since I'll probably never read about the Donner Party, even though I've Wikipedia'd it, I will probably sell this if I can. It's not great shape, but there you go. If you don't know about the Donner Party, they traveled through, I think, the Sierra Nevadas. Was it the Sierra Nevada? Yeah. They reached the Sierra Nevada mountains as the first heavy snows of the season closed the pass ahead of them, and then they ended up eating the dead bodies and shit like that. But if they're already dead, I mean, chew along. It's not like I don't believe they killed anyone and ate them. The Genius of Birds, Jennifer Ackman. Nice cover. Birds are astonishingly intelligent creatures. According to revolutionary new research, some birds rival primates and even humans in their remarkable forms of intelligence. In The Genius of Birds, acclaimed author Jennifer Ackman explores their newly discovered brilliance and how it came about. I will admit that birds are pretty smart, but then there's also the dumb bird that flies into a window or pecks and is unaware that a cat is about to pounce on it. So, I mean, birds have their limitations. Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family. And you know it's an awful book if Oprah had it as her book club. But I believe there's a kid that gets addicted in here or something like that. It's only 50 cents, so I grabbed it. And the main reason why I grabbed it was because, as I've stated 8 million times at the thrift store, when you round up, and I always round up at the thrift store since I bought this book and it's worth like 20 or 30 bucks. And I paid $1 for it. And it's also signed, so I could probably sell it for 50. And it's a first edition. So that's why I usually round up. At Taco Bell, no. Anyway, back to the book. Blah, 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 blah. The heart-rending story of the Galvins, who contains an unlimited shadow, blah, 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 blah. Schizophrenia, that's what it was. Addiction, schizophrenia, blah, blah, blah. Speaking of signed books, I've got to have at least a dozen signed Jonathan Rand. What's that? Cross that name out. I never understand that when people cross their name out when they donate a book to the thrift store. I can see if it has like all your personal information, but come on, buddy. Number 5, Terrible Tractors of Texas. Is that what this is? No, it's the Strange Spirits of St. Ignace. I wonder how many of these books this guy pops out a year. See if I can get... It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was a face, a real face in the smoke. It wasn't just smoke that looked like a face. It was an actual face that was forming in the gray wisps of smoke. I could see a chin and a nose and a mouth as I watched the face became even clearer. Aaron and Bobby were huddled close together on the other side of the fire. I could see them staring up at the huge face that loomed over the fire. They were terrified. The Foucault Reader. I believe it's Foucault. Could be Foucault. I know there was a pitcher for the Detroit Tigers back in the day that was named Foucault, but I don't know how to say this guy's name. Paul Rabinow, editor. Michael Foucault was one of the most influential thinkers in the contemporary world. Someone whose work has affected the teaching of half a dozen disciplines ranging from literary criticism to the history of criminology, but of his many books, not one offers a satisfactory introduction to the entire complex body of his work. The Foucault Reader was commissioned precisely to serve that purpose. The Undertaker's Wife, Wisdom and Musings, Life in a Small Town Funeral Home. Foreword by David Buttrick and Helen DeVos. Wow. What an awful color for the back of a book. Celia M. Hastings holds a master's degree in religious education from Western Theological Seminary in Holland, Michigan. She is the author of the Wisdom series, a Bible of curriculum for adults. No one will forget the people who passed through the home of the Undertaker's wife. What James Herriot did for the country veterinarian Celia Hastings does for the small town undertaker. With warmth, humor, and a splendid voice, this at first reluctant undertaker's wife chronicles her own journey from farmer's daughter to obtaining an advanced theological degree and becoming an organist in a small town funeral home, which is also the family home she shares with her husband, a second generation funeral director. Something tells me this is rather sappy. Agatha Christie, Miss Marple, the complete short stories, the queen of mystery. Have a rather impressive collection of Agatha Christie for somebody who's never read a single page of one of her books. Damn, she had that many books. What? There's no fucking way. Hey, I got 600 books, buddy. I still want to read about when she disappeared for, I think it was 2 weeks. After her husband cheated on her, she disappeared for 2 weeks. What do you got, Brobs? The collection gathers together every short story featuring one of Agatha Christie's most famous creations, Miss Marple, described by her friend Dolly Bantry as the typical old maid of fiction. Miss Marple has lived almost her entire life in the sleepy hamlet of St. Mary Mead. Jolson. And at first I thought it was fucking Steve Martin or Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers Kid, but no, it's Al Jolson. And you will recognize Al Jolson once I show you a picture. Of course, Al Jolson is untouchable as far as a subject of interest for anybody, since he wore the dreaded blackface, even though that's not him. There he is. So, I wonder if Jolson, was that even Jolson's main act? I honestly don't know anything about him. Born in Russia, he sang of Dixie and a Swanee River he never saw until he was 40. He once said, "I've got so much dough that 14 guys couldn't spend it in their lifetimes. But I'd rather die than quit this business." This is his story. Maybe I'll read this on the channel. I literally know nothing about him except his blackface. And I don't even know anything about that except that he wore blackface. And was it shows? Was it on TV? Was he a movie star? I don't know. Obviously, if he was rich, he probably was a movie star. Civil War Ghost and Legends. And I have at least 3 copies of this book. What's this say? Property of Frances Jeanette Roy, Dearborn Heights, Michigan. October 17th, 1999, Northville, Michigan. It's almost 26 years ago, ma'am. Like I said, I have numerous copies of this, but bought it anyway. Maybe I'll read it for the Halloween month that we have going on. Bill was amazed at how wet the handkerchief had become, since it was not his own. Whose blood was it? He thought of wounds that bled mysteriously on religious statues, eyes of graven images that shed tears. Strange, utterly miraculous stories passed through his mind, and when he looked at his stained hand, his stomach felt queasy. Could it somehow be the blood of his dead Confederate ancestor? No. Total bullshit is what it was. Cold is the Grave, a novel of suspense by Peter Robinson. And if you look closely at this book, you're going to see it has a Mylar jacket, and that's the reason why I paid 95 cents for this book. Would have been nice if it was signed, and I don't even know if this guy has any value on his signed books, but that's why I bought it. I don't really care what the book's about. Mr. K's Used Books. Yeah, so I'm going to transfer this to a book that I actually want to keep. I've been threatening to buy this book, and I probably have bought it already because I know I've talked about it. But every time I see this book, it's always in shabby condition. I don't know why. But this one was 25 cents and in amazing condition. So I picked it up. How much does it retail for? 25 cents. It's the only reason why I go to the thrift store that I got this at. Is because they've lowered their books to a reasonable price. That's an obscenely low price. Another fat book for $0.25. The Life of a Tormented Evolutionist. Unquestionably the finest biography ever written about Darwin. Darwin has now become, and properly, the quintessentially socially embedded scientist. Desmond and Moore are brilliant in their relentless and integrative pursuit of this truly unifying theme. Pretty sure that Darwin was really religious, wasn't he? Winner of the 1991 James Tate Black. It's a fat ass book. These Truths, A History of the United States by Jill Lepore. I didn't notice until I was in line that it was signed by her. It's not a very old book, so I'm not sure why someone would read this and then donate it. Oh wait, she wrote Joe Gould's Teeth. Do I have that book or no? No, 2018. Yeah, why wouldn't you buy this for $1? I did. Not perfect, but I think it's got moisture exposure on the jacket. Kind of feels like it. Nah, maybe not. Maybe it's just that. There she is. Hi, guys. I wrote the entire history of the United States, buddy. All right. Lost Restaurants of Detroit. Paul Vachon. Stouffer's? Wait, fucking Stouffer's had a restaurant? Are you kidding me? What? That's crazy. And that looks like the same Stouffer's, too. How was Buddy's Pizza lost? Pretty sure Buddy's Pizza's still around, buddy. I want to see Stouffer's. That's fucking amazing if that was really a Detroit store. There's no way. Had to have been a chain. Stouffer's downtown, page 50. I'll lose my mind if that's a real thing. Stouffer's downtown. Rarely do national chain restaurants make a memorable impression on a community, but the Detroit area... I gotta sneeze. But the Detroit area locations of Stouffer's proved to be the exception. Founded by Abraham and Lena Stouffer in 1922 with a single restaurant in Cleveland, one of the company's first expansions was to Detroit, where it opened on Woodward Avenue at Campus Martius in 1929. Later, Stouffer's locations sprang up in a number of major blah, blah, blah. Stouffer's always seemed to hit the right notes by offering a menu that was appealing yet affordable, sophisticated but unpretentious. Grilled lean lamb chops, poached eastern salmon hollandaise, and sesame fried chicken with great preserves were just a few examples of Stouffer's creative legacy. Detroit was an especially successful place for the Stouffers, which prompted them to offer a second location on Washington Boulevard in 1935. The company was so committed to quality that it even has its own in-house school to teach dietetics. In her memoir, On My Own, longtime Detroiter Manny, it's got to be Mary, Damasa recounts her experiences. As the years wore on, however, Stouffer's met the same fate as many of its downtown counterparts: lack of business due to the outflow of residents and businesses to the suburbs. By the mid-70s, both venues had closed, leaving yet another hole in the downtown dining scene. That's crazy. They never blame it on Marxism, the reason why Detroit's a shithole. Bathe 7 times, a contemplative look at the 7 capital sins by Mother Nadine. Examination of conscience, gluttony. Intercessors of the Lamb. Notes on shapeshifting. Gabi Abreu. Romance is a medium and a kiss is a portal. I'm going to have to look this chick up. This book is ridiculous. Oh no, she mentions Clarice Lispector. You know she's a nutter. Gabi Abreu, first edition, what year? Not a Cult, Los Angeles, California. Exercises in Shapeshifting. To Nico from Kyle A., November 2023. She really appreciated it. Gabi Abreu, Poems and Other Stories. Oh, this is poems. I thought this was a fucking book on actual shapeshifting. All right. That one can go in the trash. I thought the end was actually... Anyway. Too Good to Be True. The Colossal Book of Urban Legends by Jan or Jan Harold Brunvand. I have quite a few books on urban legends, but now I have another. Can never have enough, can you? Can you? Too Good to Be True, the Classic Book of Urban Legends. Shall we look up one? The Barrel of Bricks, too long. Ski Accident, too long. The Golf Bag. A golfer was having a terrible round, hitting ball after ball far out into the woods or straight into sand traps or water hazards. Finally, at the 18th hole, after plunking 3 more shots into a pond, the disgusted player flung his whole bag of clubs into the pond and strode out to the parking lot, vowing never to play this stupid game again. 5 minutes later, watched by the same group in the clubhouse bar who had seen the earlier scene, the golfer returned. He borrowed a rake from a groundskeeper and fished out his golf bag, then sheepishly got his car keys out of a zippered pocket, flung the golf bag back into the water, and walked back to the parking lot. Told around numerous golf clubhouses as a true local occurrence, although to my knowledge it has never been verified. Come on. I mean, that's about as a fucking common of a story. I guarantee it was true. Considering how many people abuse their golf clubs. And lastly, the portable obituary, how the famous, rich, and powerful really died. Michael Largo, author of Final Exits. Let's see. Hey, was that Scott Joplin? That's related to what's his name? Jolson. He was another black performer. Let's see how he died. Black performers of the 1800s didn't look on minstrel shows as negatively as one might imagine, since it was the only venue for their music. In fact, ragtime was a spin-off of the fast-paced act that minstrel shows required to keep audiences enthralled. The idea was to rag, as in to cut up and alter, a traditional piece of music by changing the rhythm and tempo and replace the counterpoint harmonies of classical music with syncopated African percussion harmonies. Some said they were jazzing up the sound. The craze began with the publication of Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag. Where did we get to his death? Nevertheless, Joplin persisted and began work in the first open opera soon after dementia from syphilis. Soon after he got syphilis and began to take its toll, and he wrote only phrases of music during brief interludes of lucidity. Scott Joplin died of the complications of syphilis in 1917 at age 49, in obscurity and without even a notice of his death or obituary to be found anywhere. The rage of ragtime was gone as jazz took over as the in sound. Joplin's music remained relatively unknown until the movie The Sting, 1973, gave it new life. In 1976, his opera Treemonisha won a Pulitzer Prize. Cray. Woody Guthrie. About Goody Wuthrie. Damn, she was homely. Jean Eagles. Oh, she got into heroin. Wait, they had heroin shops in Chinatown? There were 200,000 heroin addicts in the United States. The prevailing treatment at the time consisted of treating the drug addict with more drugs, particularly more potent morphine derivatives, which often cause fatal overdoses. In the fall of 1929, she checked into a private drying out hospital in New York. A week before the stock market crashed, unfortunately, she left via the morgue. Dumb bitch. Hey, I'm going to try some heroin. All right, that's all.